A crowd had gathered on the platform of a small town railway station. Passengers with suitcases looked on as a group made noise nearby, seeing someone off to the army. A man with a guitar played lively music. Someone sang along and danced while others cried. The main character was a young man, a tall and strong guy with a big backpack on his back. He constantly responded to someone, nodding in agreement, promising something, and holding a fragile girl close to him, who was quietly crying while burying her face in his chest. With his other hand, the guy hugged a middle-aged woman, who, though holding on, had tears treacherously streaming from her eyes. A grey-haired man stood nearby, occasionally patting the guy on the shoulder and sighing heavily, looking away. The soldier's mother, father and girlfriend wanted time to stop right then. But then they heard the electric train whistle and the group froze. The guitar fell silent. Everyone focused on seeking the right train carriage. "Here it is," one of the guys in the group shouted. "Jeremy, just as we ordered." The right carriage really stopped near the noisy group. Everyone rushed to hug and kiss the guy. "Serve honestly, son," said the father. The mother cried, hugging her son tightly, and the girlfriend hung on the guy from the other side. "Okay, enough, my dears," the guy said in a trembling voice. "Mum, Beth, everything will be all right. I'm off, but I'll return soon." After kissing his mother and girlfriend, he waved goodbye to everyone and got on the train. The whole group waved their hands in unison as the train slowly moved on. The guy looked out the window and waved back. Soon the train picked up speed and, humming triumphantly, set off into the distant lands. Beth, Jeremy's girlfriend, stood and watched it go away, and the mature woman who had cried on the guy's chest was doing the same. Suddenly they met eyes. "What are you waiting for?" whispered the elder woman. "Go already. But don't think that Jeremy will come back to you." "What are you saying, Mrs. Powell?" replied the girl just as quietly. "I love your son, and I will definitely wait for him." "Don't make me laugh," the mother answered angrily. "You're just like your mother. Go, wave your tail in front of other men, and forget about my Jeremy." She wanted to say something else, something hurtful and painful for the girl, but her husband tugged her by the shoulders and led her away from the platform. Mrs. Powell obediently went, shedding tears again. "Ben," her mournful voice was heard, "I can see what she's like. She's not a match for Jeremy. What a shameless person she is for coming here on such a day." "Well, what can we do if our son chooses her?" Mr. Powell responded somewhat guiltily. "All you men are the same," the woman continued. "You don't think with your brains, but with another part of your body." Beth heard their conversation, and it hurt her so much. Why didn't Jeremy's parents like her? She had never given them any reason to speak ill of her. Beth and Jeremy were classmates. In the last grade, they developed their first pure and naive feelings for each other. Jeremy would walk Beth home from school, and they would take evening walks around their hometown. They were so happy together. They never even thought about adult relationships. They only had their first kiss 2 months after they started dating. Jeremy would often lift his petite girlfriend up and spin her around, and Beth would laugh. She laughed with happiness. Yes, they were happy together. On their graduation day, they ran away from everyone and sat by the river until morning. They talked, hugged, and made plans for the future. That's how they met their first adult dawn in life. And they didn't care what others were gossiping about behind their backs. They knew that they hadn't done anything shameful. Jeremy treasured Beth as the biggest treasure in his life. After finishing school, they wanted to get married right away, but Jeremy's parents objected. If they always thought about their son's relationship with that girl, as they called Beth, was something frivolous all this time, now they were concerned. Mrs. Powell began to persuade her son that Jeremy could have plenty of girls like Beth, or even better. Mr. Powell agreed with his wife, preferring to support her in everything. After all, she was his boss in life and at work. Mrs. Powell worked as the chief at the construction department in the city administration, while Mr. Powell was just a driver. What annoyed Mrs. Powell the most was that her son had chosen a simple girl as his bride, and a single mother's daughter too. Beth's mother Sarah came pregnant from the capital many years ago and gave birth to Beth. No one knew who her father was. Sarah worked as a simple seamstress, sewing costumes for artists at a local cultural centre and doing some work at home. Mrs. Powell didn't want to associate with such a family and had already found a bride for her son, the mayor's daughter, Paula. Although Paula wasn't so good-looking, she presented great opportunities. Mrs. Powell urged her son to be friends with Paula, but he refused. He said that he only needed Beth. After finishing school, Jeremy became uncontrollable for his parents. Mrs. Powell was going to send him to study at a prestigious college, but he suddenly decided to join the army. He said that a real man must serve his time and then get a profession. Mrs. Powell cried and hugged her son, but to no avail. She even went to the draft board secretly to exempt her son from the army. But the commissioner was a real military man. He advised the mother to be proud that she had raised such a son. He didn't look for excuses and loopholes, but wants to honourably fulfil his duty to the motherland. Of course, this was true, but the second reason for leaving for the army was that Jeremy hoped that during this time his mother would finally calm down and accept his Beth, and when he returned they would get married. His mother would see how sincerely Beth waited for him, and she would believe in the seriousness of their feelings. Jeremy had no doubt about Beth or himself. They spent the night before Jeremy's departure together, like they did at their prom, on the river. They were sitting, hugging in silence. "Jeremy, I love you," Beth whispered, "and if you like, everything can happen now." "I really want this," he admitted, "but no, I love you very much. I'm afraid to offend you. Let's not rush. I'll be back. We'll get married then, and everything will be as it should be." 6 months passed. Jeremy served in the airborne forces, and he loved it. Beth wrote to him often, and sometimes they even managed to talk on the phone. There were frequent messages from their parents, too, and then Beth suddenly fell silent. There were no letters, no messages, and her phone was unreachable. At first, Jeremy patiently waited. Then he asked his friend Ed how Beth was doing, but Ed said that he hadn't seen Beth in a long time in town. And then Jeremy's mother called. Jeremy asked her about his girlfriend. He didn't want to, but he had to. And then his mother said such a terrible and unbelievable thing. "I don't want to upset you, son, but I was right," Mrs. Powell replied with a sigh. "Your Beth turned out to be a wretch. She doesn't wait for you." "Mum, I don't believe you," Jeremy exclaimed. "You're accusing Beth, but she's not like that." "Yes, she is, son, exactly like that, and she's pregnant, and no one knows who the father is. I saw her in town. She walks with her eyes down. What a shame. It's about 5 or 6 months. She must have slept with someone right after she saw you off." Jeremy wanted to shout at his mother that she was wrong. Beth couldn't have done that. But then, why was she pregnant? There was nothing between them. Jeremy had protected Beth until the wedding. She didn't need it, apparently. After the conversation with his mother, Jeremy wasn't himself. Even his fever spiked, and he went to the infirmary. The doctors couldn't understand what was wrong with him. In fact, it was all due to the stress and shock. A week later, Jeremy calmed down and decided to let his beloved live as she wanted. He did not want to know her anymore. Jeremy carried out the rest of his conscript service worthily and then immediately signed a contract. His military life continued. Everything seemed calm at first, but then one military conflict followed another. For 4 years, Jeremy never came home, even when he was given vacation time. It wasn't because he didn't miss home and his parents. He was just afraid of running into Beth. He was a military man, a paratrooper, but he was afraid that his heart would not stand the resentment when he met with a traitor, and he might do something. His parents were worried that their son had forgotten the way home and asked him to come home for at least a week. But Jeremy always had one answer. The bosses would not let him go. But one day he was called by the head of the unit and told that the military commissariat of Jeremy's hometown had called him and said that his mother was complaining that her son had not been given a vacation for so many years. "You always take vacations, don't you?" asked the commander. "I do," Jeremy agreed, "but I never went home once." "Why?" "I don't want to." The head of the unit immediately realized that the reason was the girl, and therefore advised Jeremy to forget about her and go see his parents. Jeremy had to go home to calm his mother. He had been on the train for 3 days and he was almost home. At the hub station, where the train stopped for about 30 minutes, Jeremy decided to walk along a little and buy something to eat in the station square. He reached the first stall and stood in line. People were bustling around him. Jeremy looked at his watch, then at the train. He would make it in time. And then he saw a young woman with a child from afar who looked different from the other people. The woman was wearing old but clean clothes and stomping shoes. The boy, about 3 years old, was also neatly dressed but poorly. She held his hand tightly. Occasionally, the woman would ask the hurrying passengers for alms. Jeremy couldn't hear the words, but he realized that she was asking for money. He always shuddered at the sight of beggars. What prevents her from going to work? The woman came closer, and Jeremy froze in amazement. He recognized her. It was Beth. Their eyes met. Beth also recognized him, shuddered, and then turned and ran in the other direction, grabbing the boy in her arms. Jeremy rushed after her. He didn't understand it himself, but he had to talk to her. Yes, he was very offended by Beth, but he certainly did not wish such a fate for her. He grabbed her by the shoulders when they were near his carriage. "Beth, stop!" he shouted. "Stop, I say!" The woman turned to him. Her face reflected pain and despair. She clutched the child tighter to her, tears running down her face. Seeing that the mother was crying, the boy began to cry too. "Hush, hush," Jeremy repeated in confusion, not knowing where to start the conversation, but he still held Beth's hand tightly so that she wouldn't run away. "I'm hurt," he suddenly heard her voice. "I'm sorry." Jeremy came to his senses and let go of her hand. "You just don't run away. Let's talk, Beth. I know that you didn't wait for me. I was furious with you and I didn't want to see you. But now that we've met, let's talk. What happened to you? Why are you like this? What are you doing here?" Beth only kept silent and shook her head in response. "I'm sorry for interrupting, but we're leaving," a young conductor shouted to Jeremy. "Get into the train." Jeremy looked at Beth and the child. No, he could not leave them now, even though Beth had betrayed him. He just had to help her. "I'm not going," he shouted to the conductor. "Please, can you throw my bags out of the carriage?" The conductor widened her eyes, wanting to say something, but then waved her hand and ran to Jeremy's place. On the departing train, the man caught the suitcase and bag in midair. Jeremy turned around in alarm, but everything was fine. Beth stayed nearby and wasn't crying anymore. The little boy nestled against her chest had fallen asleep. They sat on a bench in the station square, both silent and unsure how to start the conversation. Finally, Jeremy spoke up. "My mum told me about your pregnancy," he said. "Why didn't you explain anything to me yourself? What happened to you?" "Your mum told you," Beth bitterly smiled. "And you believed her, right?" "How could I not?" You stopped talking, stopped communicating. Besides, I can see that there really is a child." Jeremy nodded at the boy, who was already sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. "A child," Beth whispered, "but you don't know anything. I'll tell you, and you decide for yourself whether to believe me or not." 4 years ago, Beth's life was shattered. A week after seeing Jeremy off, she went to a medical college to submit her documents. Her documents were accepted, and Beth had a high chance of becoming a student at that college in the fall. The girl was in a good mood when she left the building. There, she met Ed, Jeremy's former friend. At the time, she thought he was there by chance, but that wasn't the case. Ed offered to drive her in his father's car, and Beth agreed. On the way, the classmate offered her a coffee, which he had supposedly just bought from a vending machine. The girl unsuspectingly drank it, and she only woke up late in the evening, in bed with Ed. Beth didn't remember anything, but she felt that the scoundrel had taken advantage of her, and he didn't hide it. "You're not so bad," Ed said it with a cheeky smile. "I liked it. I think Jeremy will like it too when he sees the video." "What video?" Beth whispered in horror, covering herself with a blanket. "Here it is." Ed showed her the video. Beth watched, and tears streamed down her cheeks. She was ashamed, hurt and disgusted. "You put something in my coffee," she guessed. "I'll go to the police." "Go ahead," Ed shrugged, "but probably you forget that my uncle is the police chief." "I don't understand why you did this. Jeremy is your friend. We were getting along fine. I didn't expect you to be like this." "Don't make a monster out of me. Relax, baby, and live on, and I'll keep the video." That evening she ran out of Ed's apartment and cried all night at home. The only person she could explain everything to was her mother. They cried all night, and Sarah urged her daughter to go to the police, but Beth firmly decided that she didn't want publicity. She wanted to forget the whole story. She'd wait for Jeremy to come back and then tell him everything. At first, Beth continued to communicate with Jeremy, but Mrs. Powell found out about it and one day met the girl on the street, demanding that she stop interfering in her son's life. "Otherwise, I'll send him that very video." Mrs. Powell said it with an ugly smile. Beth recoiled from her in horror. She only now realized who was the organizer of the whole disgusting story. And then Beth realized that she was pregnant. Her first impulse was to get rid of it, but a doctor at the clinic warned her that this procedure would have serious consequences. She had a negative rhesus. In the future, she would not be able to give birth. Many tears were shed, but Sarah convinced her daughter to keep the child, and if Jeremy loved her, he'd figure everything out when he came back. But she couldn't bring herself to tell him about the pregnancy or the whole situation. How would he react? Beth decided to keep silent before his arrival. Her mother was right, he'll come back and everything will be fine. When Beth was 7 months pregnant, there was a short circuit in their private house's wiring. His mother would never let them live together, and it was disgusting to remember Tommy's biological father. Tommy was hers alone. But Mrs. Powell intervened, and, in a word, there was a real prospect of living on the street. Sarah and her pregnant daughter settled in an old house not far from the station, with an elderly aunt in a neighbouring district. Soon Beth gave birth to a son and named him Tommy. She tried not to think about Jeremy, realising that their paths had definitely diverged. But more troubles came her way. The old aunt died, and Beth's mother, who worked days and nights on a sewing machine to earn more, suffered a stroke. For a year and a half, Beth nursed her mother, who could barely walk, and raised the baby. Money was catastrophically lacking, and Beth realised that she would have nothing to cook dinner with that evening. She felt ashamed to the point of tears, but she saw no other way out than to go to the train station to beg for alms. And who knew that this was how she would meet Jeremy? Jeremy listened to Beth, and despite his mother's lies, he believed her. She was still the same pure, bright and sincere person, only wilted like a flower, which was not mercy by the cruel wind. But everything can be mended. Jeremy was ashamed that for all this time he had never doubted his mother's words. It hadn't even occurred to him that Beth could have been abused. And by whom? His friend. And his mother was the one who started it all. "Beth, my girl," Jeremy said in a broken voice, "I will not leave you now." She looked at him with eyes full of tears and remained silent, then looked at her son. Jeremy understood everything and gently stroked the sleeping child's head. "I won't leave both of you," he whispered, and Beth leaned against his shoulder, tears flowing. He spent the whole vacation with Beth and Tommy, fixing up the old house, securing a place in the sanatorium for her mother, and buying all the essentials: food, furniture and clothes. A week before their departure, they got married, without a wedding feast or beautiful outfits. Jeremy promised that they would still have a wedding, just a little later. He also adopted Tommy. He went back to his hometown to tell his parents what he thought of them. His mother sobbed and shouted that she had done everything for his happiness, while his father as always gave in. Jeremy only waved his hand. "Mother, you're a criminal. Do you realize that?" He said goodbye. "Beth and I are family and will be forever. And now you can do nothing." "Jeremy, you're making a mistake." Mrs. Powell didn't back down. "Why do you need someone else's child?" But Jeremy said firmly, "Tommy is mine now. Beth is mine. And by the way, my dear parents, I am seeing you for the last time. I won't come to you again. I don't want to know you." Jeremy left, slamming the door. Of course, he realized that he had said it quickly. Of course, he would learn about his father and mother, but now only through acquaintances. Such betrayal, even from those closest to him, is not forgivable. But maybe it could be forgiven. Maybe it just needs time to pass. Then he found his former friend, Ed. When Ed realized that Jeremy knew everything, he turned white, blushed, fell to his knees, and begged for forgiveness. "I wanted to punch you in the face," Jeremy told him, "but I don't want to get dirty. You'll get what's coming to you anyway." And he left. A year later, when Sarah got better, Beth and Tommy moved to the military town where Jeremy was stationed. In a small chapel, the lovers were married. Now no one can take away their love because they are under protection.